Hello YouTube, Sidekick here with another installment of the Iron Bomber's Guide to the DCS Galaxy. As you may have guessed based on the title of this video, we're going to talk about cluster bombs today. Now, I should say that the title is intended to be a joke, because coming from a military background, even though it's many years ago, there is really only one word that follows the word cluster in my vocabulary, and it usually isn't bomb. But today, that's what we're going to talk about. Cluster bombs. Specifically, we're going to talk about Rockeyes. This is a bit of a supplemental video because in the last video where I talked about the Mark 80 iron bombs and the Mark 20 Rockeyes, I found that I didn't really get the effects I was expecting with the Rockeyes when we went out to the range, so I decided to look at them a little bit more closely, and in doing that I found enough stuff that was interesting that I thought I would make another video. So, here's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Rockeye and how one would expect them to work, at least based on what you can find out about them publicly. Then we're going to go out to the range and try a few different drop parameters and see what we get. And then we're going to compare that to what we expected and draw some conclusions about how DCS actually treats the weapon and how that might be a little bit different than what we expected. Now, I'll hasten to point out at this point that this video is intended to try and understand how the Rockeyes work in DCS. The purpose of this video is not to complain about that or to imply that they in some way need to be fixed. At the end of the day, the way I approach topics like this is that DCS is both a game and a simulation. To the extent that it's a simulation, we start with the expectation that the real world will essentially provide us a good rule book for how things are supposed to work. But to the extent that DCS is a game, we have to accept that there are certain abstractions that are necessary to allow us to enjoy playing the game, and that so long as we understand what the actual rules are, we can enjoy that experience even if it isn't just like real life. So I'm going to spend the time in this video trying to figure out how Rockeyes work in DCS, and I'm not going to worry about whether or not that's exactly how they should work or how I'd like them to work. I'm really just interested in trying to figure out how to use them in the game. So with that in mind, let's go take a look at the Mark 20 Rockeye in a little bit more detail. So let's take a look at the Mark 20 Rockeye. I described the basic operations of the Rockeye in the last video. This time, I just want to take a bit of time to think about how the various, attack parameters like dive speed, altitude, and angle would affect the way the Rockeye works, so that we have some basis for comparing that to what we see in the game when we go out and do some testing. As we talked about last time, the Rockeye mechanism is pretty simple. An aircraft drops the bomb, and at a pre-programmed time, the casing opens up like a clamshell and falls backwards, and the submunitions inside continue their flight, disperse themselves, and descend on the target area. This is a pretty simple dispersal mechanism. Later CBUs that we'll see in future episodes use more sophisticated mechanisms. Given this mechanism, though, what would affect the dispersal pattern? Well, obviously the speed and angle of flight of the bomb at the time of dispersal are the main things that affect the pattern. A bomb on a low, flat trajectory will obviously disperse the bomblets over a wider area, compared to one that's on a steeper trajectory. Now, the angle of flight of the bomb at the point of dispersal is obviously a function of the dive angle, speed, and altitude of the aircraft when it drops the bomb. And it's also a function of the altitude at which dispersal occurs. Now, in real life, the dispersal altitude is adjustable on the ground pre-flight, but in DCS, it's preset and it's fixed. The forums will tell you it's about 1,500 feet, but based on what I'm seeing, I think it might be a little lower than that, but we'll take a look at that when the time comes. Okay, given that the dispersal altitude is a constant, we can say that basically the lower and flatter and faster the bomb is dropped, the flatter its trajectory will be at dispersion, and the wider its area of effect will be. And the higher, steeper, and slower the bomb is dropped, the smaller its effect will be. So you can also probably see that the higher you drop the bombs, the less effect either of the other factors will have, because at the point of dispersal, gravity will be the main force affecting the bomb, and it'll more or less be dropping straight down. So let's go out to the range and see how all that plays out. Okay, here we are out on the range, just gaining some altitude, going to get ourselves fenced in. We'll pick the Mark 20s, and we'll turn them on, and we'll drop them in pairs. And we're going to designate the middle target because that's the light armored vehicles. Now you notice I'm leaving it in auto mode and I'm not changing the aim point. So the idea here is we'll try and keep the same aim point so we have some consistency from run to run, and we'll use auto mode. And now we're just kind of do a little bit of an S-bend here where we're going to fly past the target with it off to our right, and we're going to come around, put it off our left nose so we can do a roll in. That's kind of like a normal pattern. I think this time we'll start at about 15K. We'll try and take a fairly shallow dive, like about a 20-degree dive, and drop it sort of a medium altitude, maybe 4,000 to 6,000 feet. So a pretty vanilla drop. Okay. And we're coming around, we've got the target designated, and we're going to put it off our left nose, and we're going to slide right in for our attack run. There's the target there off the left nose, just out of the DMT. Maybe we'll turn in a little bit so we get it back on there. Okay, we're going to roll in. Pull the lift vector towards the target, put it in air to ground mode so we can see the bomb fall line, and we're just going to try and get the flight path vector on the bomb fall line and ride it right down, right there a little bit, and we'll pull it up a little bit, so about 25 degrees. Nice shallow dive, pickle and hold, and release at a little bit above 4,000 feet, and let's see what we get. Oh, there's a pattern. It's pretty close to centered. Looks like we got two vehicles, and the pattern was maybe a little bit bigger than the 25-meter circle. Okay, we're going to come out. We're going to go around. Like in the last video, I'm not going to show you the whole pattern. We'll skip out here. Once we get turned around, we'll go out a little bit farther, and basically what we're going to do is we're going to go out. We're going to turn around, we're going to pick up the next target, so waypoint number 4, which is the tanks, and we're going to basically try and fly a similar approach on the armored targets and see how we do. So we're coming around here, gone a little ways out, just so we have time to designate the target when we come around. And now we're about ready to roll in. We've got waypoint 4 designated. And we'll just come around here and get ourselves lined up. There's the target. Lift vector to target. Watch for that bomb fall line. Try and roll the flight path vector out over the target. And then pull up to our aim off mark. And we're maybe a little bit steeper this time, still around 30 degrees. We're going to ride it down to around 5,000 feet where we let go. And see what we get. There go the bombs, and then, well, you see, not a very dramatic animation that time. Okay, here we are again. We've switched up. Gone back, rearmed, gone back out. We're going to come in and do a different kind of approach this time. This time, we're going to take a really shallow dive and try to get down pretty low. So we're basically going to drop low and fast and shallow. And so this should be a pretty wide pattern. As you can see, we're already lined up on the target and all fenced in. And the target's there at a 10-degree dive angle. We're going to stay just above that. Probably try to get the dive angle up to something more like 15 degrees by the time we actually drop. But it's just a matter of riding it down. Keep it lined up. And just keep a constant dive angle. So yeah, in that last target, bomb didn't seem to do very much, but we did also still seem to get a couple of vehicles. So that's going to be interesting to try and figure out what's going on there. All right, we're still at about 10 degrees. Let's pull it up a little bit so we can bring the ladder up a little higher so we can dive down at the last minute there. We're still at 7,000 feet. Okay, that 15-degree line is starting to come up past the target. Now, as with always in iron bombing, the height of our release is going to be set by the distance our aim-off mark is from the target. So the closer we make that to the target, the lower we're going to go. So this time we're going to aim pretty low. Try and come down almost to that 15-degree line. Getting pretty close now, though, so we'll pickle and hold. And there they go. And there they go. You can see they dispersed way far back from the target. So yes, we have a much bigger zone that time. It looked like it was almost double the size of the target circle. So dropping lower and faster definitely ends up spreading the effect over a wider area. It still only looks like we got a couple of vehicles, though. We'll have to confirm that. We'll take a look at TacView and some other things after we're done, see exactly how we did. So, same as last time, we've gone out of fairways. We're just coming around. And here we go. Turn in towards the target. And we'll designate the fourth target. And then we'll drop the nose a little bit here. Get in auto mode. Roll around till we're lined up. And we're a little bit steeper dive this time. Not much. So we'll aim for, again, between 15 and 20 degrees, nice and low. And we'll see what we can do to the tanks if we spread the cluster bombs out over them. And it's coming up, pickle and hold. And there they go. And there they go. Yeah, once again, way back from the target. They disperse. Yep, nice long pattern that time. Probably, geez, maybe almost 75 meters. But I'm not sure how much damage we did. Covered the target, but I don't know what we hit. So that'll be interesting to take a look at. Okay, last try flight that we're going to do here. We're up again. This time we're going up nice and high. Same procedure as last time in terms of designating the target, but this time we're going to try to come at it in more of a classic dive bombing attack. So we're going to look for between 35 and 45 degrees dive angle, and we're going to try and drop probably below 5,000 feet. So this is kind of probably going to be the smallest pattern that we're going to generate. It's a pretty aggressive dive, but once again, we just need to roll out. Bomb fall on lined up. So yeah, we're between 35 and 40 degrees. We're riding it down, and bomb's gone at about 6,000 feet. Now you can see how much closer to the target they were. Yeah, we missed a little long. Not sure why that would be. Didn't seem to do a lot of damage either, but nice tight pattern, though. You can see probably even a little bit tighter than the first time. Though not a lot, but certainly way tighter than the kind of low-level flat release that we did on the last one. So once again, Once again, we have gone out a ways. We have the new target designated. Now all we have to do is get ourselves lined up and roll in again. Try and do a nice, fairly steep run again, and just see if maybe we can get a little bit closer to the target this time. Okay, there it is, and we'll just tighten it up a little bit here. If we roll in here, we won't be that steep a dive angle, so just pull it in a little bit more before we commit. Okay, now we're going to roll in, lift vector to target, pull the flight path vector on to that bomb fall line, and pull up past the target. And once again, we're between about 35 and 40 degrees. Maybe try and get a little lower this time, so aim even closer. And pickle and hold. And there's the drop at around 4,000 feet. And there they go. And they explode right over the target. Well, right in the middle of the target that time. Okay, that's it for the runs we're going to do today. But let's take a look here. Let's put all three targets up on the same scale. Here we got the lower one on the left, the steeper one on the right. You definitely see the impact of the dive angle on the size of the pattern. Here's the second sets. Yeah, once again, and you know, the middle and the right hand one, not about the same, but definitely the shallow dive results in a larger pattern. But what effect did the bombs actually have? Well, that's where things get a little more interesting. Let's get out the whiteboard and take a look at a couple of things. First of all, here's a frame-by-frame look at what is happening when the bombs go off. First of all, you see the bombs exploding there and dispensing the submunitions. But then look at this. We almost immediately see the damage showing up. See, the vehicle is glowing. That's because it's registered as being damaged. Well, that's a couple of frames before it actually seems like the submunitions are impacting. This is important, I think, because it implies that the DCS process that is modeling the damage to the targets is not the same process that is showing the animation of the actual submunitions impacting. In other words, DCS is not actually fully modeling the dispersal of the bomblets and then tracking each individually to see what damage is done. Instead, DCS appears to be making some kind of calculation about the amount of damage that will be done, essentially rolling the dice to hit for each of the vehicles and then rolling another dice roll to see how much damage is done. And then DCS is separately adding graphical animation of the submunitions impacting. So let's see if looking at the situation in TacView can give us any insights into what's going on. Here's a TacView telemetry file of one of our drops. Here you see the Rockeyes being dropped. Here you see what appears to be the dispersal event, but notice a couple of things. First of all, note the altitude. It's about 800 feet. This seems to be typical based on the testing I did. Just about always you see this dispersal event at 800 feet in TacView. So it's definitely not 1,500 feet like you see on the forums. I'm not sure what's going on there. Second of all, note that at the dispersal point, each Rockeye ejects one projectile labeled Rockeye cluster. As we roll the footage forward, each one of these projectiles hits one target vehicle, even if it has to suddenly change directions to do it. Now, I don't know enough about how TacView interfaces with DCS to know exactly, if this is entirely accurate. But I can tell you that it is the pattern that is repeated in each and every test. Each Rockeye injects one Rockeye cluster, and each one of those clusters hits one target. Sometimes they both hit the same target, so in effect only one vehicle ends up being damaged by the drop. So based on that, I'm going to say that whenever we see more than 2 vehicles being damaged by a Rockeye strike, it seems like only the first 2 are actually hit by the bombs. The remainder are actually collateral damage from the others blowing up, I think, which would explain why it takes so long sometimes for multiple vehicles to show up as kills. So anyways, it appears to me that something like the following is happening. When you drop the bombs, DCS tracks them until they reach the deploy height, which seems to be around 800 feet AGL. Then DCS ejects a single Rockeye cluster for each bomb. It performs some kind of calculation to look for targets in the cluster's impact zone and determines if the cluster hits one of them. If it does, DCS does some kind of calculation to decide how much damage will be done to the affected target. So, given all of that, what does that mean for how we should use Rockeyes? Well, here is what I'm going to call Christie's rules for Rockeyes in DCS. First of all, for unarmored and light armored vehicles, Rockeyes are a bit more effective than Mark 82 bombs, but I think they're probably less effective than Mark 83s, based on the last couple of tests we've done. For tanks, the Rockeyes are actually probably more effective than the iron bombs because you don't have to drop quite as accurately to get some damage on the target. You pretty much have to hit them. With the iron bombs, you don't with the Rockeyes. The preferred attack profile for the Rockeyes is about a 20 to 30 degree dive with a release at 4,000 to 6,000 feet. Now, the animation for a low-level pass is definitely more impressive, but in actual fact, I think the accuracy is probably lower, and it doesn't actually appear that there's any more effect on the target. I would also say that you should probably aim at your preferred target rather than like the center of mass of the vehicles, because it appears that the vehicle that's most likely to be hit is the one that is closest to your aiming point. And though I'm not sure about that, but I think that's true from what I've seen. However, it does seem clear that each Rockeye will hit at most one target vehicle. The other thing I would point out is that you should drop in singles with a ripple interval rather than pairs, because both bombs in a pair may actually hit the same target. So, that's what I think you should do if you're using Rockeyes based on the way it seems like DCS treats them. If you've had a different experience, well, please leave a comment and explain what you think you know about how to drop Rockeyes. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. As always, please subscribe if you want to see more. And for now, this is going to be Sidekick, signing off.